After my wife died, my son asked me to drink a cup of white tea at the memorial dinner he claimed was being held in her honor. He smiled while he said it. Not a nervous smile. Not a grieving smile. The smooth, practiced smile of a man who had already decided how the night would end. Then my 10-year-old granddaughter Sophie slid a red envelope under my plate, pressed her small hand over mine, and whispered, "Grandpa, do not drink it. Mom says it makes you sign faster." I looked down at the envelope. On the front, in my wife's handwriting, were 5 words. Harold, I did not sign. Across the room, my son Adrian stood beside a 20-foot portrait of his dead mother, waiting for 200 guests to watch me raise my glass, bless his $9 million project, and hand over the house June had spent her life protecting. For a moment, the whole dining hall kept moving as if the world had not just cracked open under my chair. Forks touched china. A violinist played something soft near the fountain. Women in black dresses dabbed at their eyes while watching me over the rims of their glasses. My daughter-in-law Celeste held a crystal pitcher of white tea with both hands, patient as a nurse and cold as a banker. On the screen above the stage, the words June Mercer Legacy Foundation glowed in gold. Everyone thought they had come to a memorial dinner. I was starting to understand they had come to a signing ceremony. The tea was not kindness. The red envelope was not sentiment. And the woman in the portrait had managed to warn me from the grave. The pain was not only the money, though the money was enough to make any honest man sit very still. $640,000 from June's life insurance had already been moved into Adrian's company. My home on Briar Lane, appraised at $1,800,000 because of the land beneath it, had been quietly renamed a legacy site. A hospital group had promised $9 million, with more to follow, if the family appeared united before the donors. But the real wound was simpler than any number. My wife had died believing our son would protect me. Instead, he had used her last months, her name, her handwriting, her photograph, and even the grief in my face as tools for a theft he planned to call charity. Before this story is over, I am going to tell you how my own son forged his dying mother's name, stole the insurance meant to keep me safe, built a public memorial on top of a private crime, and tried to turn me into a confused old man in front of the whole county. I am going to tell you why Sophie was forced to practice saying I forgot things, why Celeste kept touching that pitcher of white tea, why a dead notary stamp mattered more than any speech in the room, and how a red envelope, a child's whisper, and one old clerk's memory turned a beautiful memorial dinner into the night my son's perfect life collapsed. My name is Harold Mercer. I am 73 years old. For 42 years, I worked in the Lancaster County Recorder's office. I was not a lawyer. I was not a judge. I was the man behind the counter who watched families discover that love does not protect property unless the paper is clean. I knew deeds, liens, trust filings, estate transfers, survey maps, old mortgage releases, and the small ugly tricks people use when they want theft to look procedural. I had spent a lifetime reading signatures. That was why June left me 5 words in red. She knew I might still forgive a son. But I would not forgive a forged record. I did not wear expensive suits or speak in polished phrases that make theft sound like administration. I was the man who kept the paper straight. Deeds. Liens. Trust filings. Estate transfers. Survey maps. Old mortgage releases written in ink that had faded to tea-colored ghosts. If a family fought over land, sooner or later one of them ended up standing at my counter with red eyes and a folder full of accusations. I learned early that people do not usually lose homes in one dramatic moment. They lose them through small signatures. One page here. One notary stamp there. A missed deadline. A quiet amendment. A word changed from joint to sole. A date moved by 2 days. A witness line filled by someone who never stood in the room. Paper can be a gentle thing in your hand. Paper can also be a knife. My wife June understood that better than most. She ran a quilting shop on Willow Street for 31 years. Not a fancy place. 2 windows. A bell over the door. Bolts of cotton stacked by color. A back room that always smelled of steam, thread, and the lemon drops she kept in a chipped blue bowl near the register. People came to her when they wanted blankets for babies, wedding quilts, memory squares from a dead husband's shirts, or just an hour of quiet company from a woman who could make grief sit down and drink coffee. June had a gift for noticing what people tried to hide. She could look at a woman picking thread for a baby quilt and know whether the father was staying. She could look at a son buying fabric for his mother's birthday and know whether he had remembered on his own or been instructed by a wife. She could look at me from across a crowded church basement and know I had eaten 2 pieces of pie after promising one. She was small, sharp, patient, and impossible to fool for long. That last part matters. Because Adrian forgot it. Adrian was our only child. I wish that sentence did not still hurt to say. When he was young, he was not cruel. That is what makes the later truth harder. Some villains arrive wearing black coats in stories. In real life, they sometimes arrive as little boys holding a paper airplane, asking you to watch how far it flies. Adrian had June's smile and my stubbornness. He was clever in the way adults praise too much when a child is small. At 8, he could talk his way out of a broken window. At 12, he could make his grandmother apologize for catching him in a lie. At 17, he learned that charm was faster than work. I saw it. June saw it sooner. She used to say, "He does not want to be bad, Harold. He wants the reward before the character." I told her that was too hard on him. I was wrong. Fathers are good at being wrong when being right would hurt too early. Adrian left home, studied business, came back with a vocabulary that made ordinary things sound profitable. Neighbors became local demographic segments. Old houses became underused assets. Widows became aging decision makers. He worked first for a senior living company, then for a developer, then for himself. By 37, he had started Mercer Continuum Living, a company that promised dignified transition housing for older adults. I never liked the phrase transition housing. It sounded like a bus station for people who still owned their memories. But Adrian knew how to pitch. He wore blue suits, spoke slowly, and used the word dignity so often people stopped asking what he intended to take. Then he married Celeste Vane. Celeste was beautiful in a way that made rooms adjust around her. Tall. Pale. Always in cream or charcoal. Hair pinned back so cleanly it looked less like style and more like policy. She was the daughter of Malcolm Vane, the most feared estate attorney in 3 counties. Malcolm built his career helping wealthy families move money before anyone else knew there was something to move. Celeste inherited his manners and removed the warmth. June disliked her from the first dinner. Not because Celeste was rude. Rudeness would have been easier. Celeste was perfectly gracious. She praised the roast. She admired the old china. She asked June about quilting with the bright patience of a person studying a primitive trade. After they left, June stood at the sink, hands in dishwater, and said, "That woman counts exits." I laughed. June did not. "I am serious," she said. "She looks at people like rooms she may need to leave." Again, I told myself June was overthinking. Again, she was not. The first time Adrian asked about our house, June was still healthy. We lived at 19 Briar Lane, in a white clapboard house built in 1918, with uneven floors, stubborn windows, and a red maple in the front yard that dropped leaves like it was trying to bury us every October. The house was not grand. But the land was valuable. 2 acres near the old Mill Creek, one of the last parcels not swallowed by medical offices and luxury retirement cottages. Developers had called for years. I always said no. June said no faster. That house held every version of us. Adrian's pencil marks on the pantry door. June's sewing room upstairs. The dent in the hallway wall from the Christmas I tried to carry a bookcase alone. The back garden where June planted lavender because she said grief needed somewhere soft to land, even before she knew grief was coming for us. When Adrian asked, he did not ask directly. Men like him rarely do. He said, "Dad, have you thought about simplifying the estate structure?" I said, "No." He smiled. "Not selling. Just protecting. If something happens to you or Mom, probate could get messy." I told him I had spent my life watching people make probate messy by trying to avoid probate. He laughed like I had made a charming old man joke. June watched him over her teacup and said nothing. 2 months later, she was diagnosed. Ovarian cancer. Late. Aggressive. The kind of diagnosis that turns calendars into weapons. At first, Adrian was attentive. He drove to appointments. He brought flowers. He spoke with doctors. Celeste organized meal trains and sent group texts with updates so polished they sounded like press releases. I was grateful. That is another hard thing to admit. I was grateful to the people who were learning where the locks were. Cancer makes you tired in places you did not know could be tired. Not just the patient. Everyone around them. You stop noticing the small shifts because the large terror takes up all the air. If a form appears on the kitchen table, you sign where someone tells you. If a nurse says a medication changed, you nod. If your son says he will handle the insurance calls, you let him. If your daughter-in-law says a trust update will keep the house safe, you do not start a war while your wife is vomiting in the downstairs bathroom. You tell yourself the family is helping. You tell yourself suspicion is ugly. You tell yourself tomorrow, when things are calmer, you will read everything. Tomorrow is a liar. June got weaker through the spring. Her shop closed 3 days a week, then 5, then for good. Customers left cards in the mail slot. Women brought casseroles and cried in our kitchen. June accepted all of it with a small smile and then whispered to me later, "If one more person says I am brave, I am going to haunt them first." She was still June. Even at the end. Especially at the end. Her mind stayed clear longer than her body did. That mattered too. Because Adrian and Celeste later built their first lie on the idea that she had been confused. She was not confused. She was in pain. There is a difference. A week before she died, I found Adrian in the hallway outside our bedroom speaking quietly into his phone. He stopped when he saw me. Too fast. I asked who it was. He said, "Insurance. Nothing for you to worry about." That phrase should be illegal. Nothing for you to worry about is almost always spoken by someone who has already decided what you are allowed to know. But June called from the bedroom then, and I let the moment pass. I let many moments pass. On the last morning, she asked me to bring her the red sewing box. Not the big one. The small lacquered box her mother had used for needles and thimbles. It sat on the second shelf in her sewing room, under folded muslin. I brought it to her. She opened it with hands that trembled badly enough to make my throat close. Inside were thread cards, a silver thimble, 3 old buttons, and a stack of small red envelopes she used for special quilt labels. She touched the envelopes. Then she looked at me. "If I ask you something, do not protect me by lying," she said. I sat beside the bed. "All right. Do you trust him?" I knew who she meant. A father should not hesitate when asked that question about his only child. I hesitated. June saw it. She closed her eyes. "Harold," she whispered, "paper remembers what people deny." Those were some of the last clear words she said. At the time, I thought she was drifting back into the language of my job. I did not know she was giving me instructions. She died 3 days later, just before dawn, while rain tapped the window and I held her hand under the quilt she had made for our 40th anniversary. Adrian arrived 20 minutes after the funeral home. Celeste arrived with coffee nobody drank. I remember the house filling with movement. Soft footsteps. Low voices. Drawers opening. Someone asking about paperwork. Someone asking if I had eaten. Someone telling me to sit down. Grief makes you obedient if you are not careful. I was obedient. That is how they started. The insurance letter came 6 weeks later. It said the beneficiary change had been processed properly. The primary recipient of June Mercer's $640,000 life insurance policy was no longer Harold Mercer. It was Mercer Continuum Living Charitable Holdings. Adrian's company. I called him. He sounded surprised. Then hurt. Then patient. That order matters. He said June had wanted part of her legacy to support elder care. He said she had discussed it with Celeste. He said I had been in the room once and probably forgotten because the days were so difficult. He said the change was legal, notarized, and consistent with June's wishes. He said, "Dad, please do not turn Mom's generosity into a family fight." That sentence worked on me because it used June as a shield. I did not fight. I should have. Instead, I accepted a smaller widow's benefit and told myself June had always cared about helping older people. She had. But she would never have taken my safety net and handed it to Adrian's company without telling me. I knew that. I buried that knowing because it made me hate my living son while I was still sleeping beside my dead wife's pillow. 3 months later, Adrian announced the June Mercer Legacy Foundation. A non-profit attached to his company. A memory care initiative. A scholarship program. A future hospice house. He used a photo of June in the first brochure. Not one I would have chosen. In it, she was standing in her shop beside a finished quilt, smiling at the person taking the picture. Me. They cropped me out. I noticed. I did not say anything. For a year, the foundation grew. Adrian was interviewed in regional magazines. Celeste built donor relationships. Malcolm Vane introduced them to hospital executives, estate planners, and families who liked charity more when it came with naming opportunities. They spoke about June as if she had been a brand they acquired. I attended one luncheon early on. Adrian put his hand on my shoulder from the stage and called me the quiet strength behind his mother's dream. People applauded. I sat there feeling like furniture. That is how they handled me. They did not throw me out at first. They displayed me. The grieving husband. The honest old clerk. The proof that their story had roots. But roots become inconvenient when people start digging. 6 months before the memorial dinner, Adrian asked me to meet him at the foundation office. It occupied the renovated first floor of an old bank downtown. Marble counters. Glass walls. Photos of June on every surface. Her face everywhere. Her voice nowhere. Celeste joined us in a conference room with frosted glass and a bowl of wrapped mints nobody touched. Adrian explained that the foundation had received a major pledge from Cartwright Mercy Health, a regional hospital group. $9 million, with another $3 million promised if the family signed before the end of the month. Enough to build June House, a residential hospice retreat for older women without family support. He said it beautifully. He always did. Then he showed me the site plan. Briar Lane. My house. My land. The red maple. June's lavender garden. All of it replaced by pale stone walkways, therapy rooms, donor plaques, and a reflection pond shaped like a quilt square. I stared at the rendering. For a second, I could not speak. Then I said, "That is my home." Celeste smiled gently. "It is June's legacy site." I looked at Adrian. He would not meet my eyes. That was the moment something inside me woke up. Not fully. Not enough. But enough to sit straighter. I said no. Adrian blinked like the word had arrived in a language he did not recognize. Dad, we have discussed this. No, you discussed this. I did not. Celeste folded her hands. Harold, nobody is taking anything tonight. This is a long process. We just need conceptual approval so donors know the family is aligned. Family aligned. Another phrase with a knife inside it. I said no again. Adrian's face tightened. Then softened. He reached across the table. Dad, grief can make decisions feel threatening. You have been alone in that house too long. Mom would not want you trapped there. That was the first time he used my grief as evidence against me in front of me. Not the last. After that meeting, small things changed. My doctor received a release form I had not signed. My bank called to confirm a scheduled consultation I had not requested. A social worker left a message about senior transition resources. Adrian sent articles about aging in place and cognitive stress after bereavement. Celeste began texting me reminders about appointments I had never forgotten. They were not attacking me. Not openly. They were building atmosphere. A little fog around my reliability. A little softness around my memory. A little concern placed carefully where people with authority might later find it. I recognized the pattern late. But not too late. At least, I hope not. The memorial dinner invitation arrived in thick cream paper. June Mercer Legacy Foundation. Memorial Donor Dinner. Formal attire. Tribute toast by Harold Mercer. Family blessing ceremony. I called Adrian. What is a family blessing ceremony? He laughed. What frightened me most was how gentle all of it looked from the outside. Nobody grabbed my arm. Nobody shouted. Nobody said, sign this house away before dessert or we will ruin you. They used softer instruments. A reminder text. A sympathetic article. A doctor I had never met. A donor dinner described as healing. A granddaughter placed beside me so cameras could catch the image of a family at peace. That was the part older people understand too well. Sometimes the people taking control of your life do not look like enemies. They look like helpful children with full calendars and warm voices. They call it support while they move the walls closer. Symbolic, Dad. Donors love that kind of thing. You say a few words. We show a short video. You sign the commemorative donor book. Simple. Only the donor book. A pause. Small. But I had spent 42 years hearing people pause before lies. Of course, he said. Of course is another phrase I no longer trust. I almost did not go. Then Sophie called. My granddaughter. Adrian and Celeste's only child. 10 years old. Smart. Quiet. June used to say Sophie had an old soul, which is what adults say when a child has learned to watch before speaking. On the phone, Sophie asked if I would sit beside her at the memorial dinner. I said I thought she would be with her parents. She said, Mom says I should be near you so you stay calm. I felt something cold move through me. Do I seem not calm, sweetheart? She did not answer. Then she whispered, Grandma said red means stop. The line went dead. I sat in my kitchen with the phone in my hand for a long time. Grandma said red means stop. June's red envelopes. The sewing box. I went upstairs faster than my knees liked. The sewing room had not changed much since she died. That was my cowardice. People call it preservation because that sounds kinder. Her cutting table still held a folded strip of blue cotton. Her glasses still lay beside the pincushion. The red sewing box was on the second shelf, exactly where I had put it after the funeral. I opened it. Thread cards. Silver thimble. Buttons. No envelopes. I searched the drawer. The baskets. The closet. Nothing. Someone had taken them. Or June had moved them. I did not know which possibility frightened me more. That night, I barely slept. At 2 in the morning, I went downstairs, made coffee, and did what I should have done months earlier. I began reading. Every document Adrian had sent. Every foundation email. Every insurance letter. Every county notice. Every property tax update. I read like the old clerk, not like a father. A father looks for reassurance. A clerk looks for the place the paper starts lying. I found the first problem at 4:17 in the morning. The insurance beneficiary change had been notarized by a woman named Denise Calder. I knew that name. Not well. Enough. She had been a mobile notary years earlier, the kind who stamped car title transfers, nursing home forms, quick affidavits. But her commission had expired the year before June's signature date. I checked twice. Then a third time. Expired. The stamp on June's form was legally dead. A dead stamp for a dying woman. That is when my hands started shaking. Not from age. From recognition. Paper remembers. By dawn, I had a legal pad full of questions. By noon, I had called the one person I trusted who knew how ugly family paperwork could get. Her name was Miriam Polk. She had worked beside me in the recorder's office for 26 years. Miriam was 71, smoked though she claimed she had quit, and could find a filing error by smell. She answered on the fourth ring. If you are calling to ask whether I still have the old index backups, the answer depends on whether this is stupid or criminal. I said, maybe both. She sighed. Bring coffee. Miriam lived in a brick duplex behind the Lutheran church. Her dining table had become an archive of everything the county forgot it still needed. Old index printouts. Microfilm notes. Notary lists. Property transfer copies. A laptop she insulted every time it updated. I showed her the insurance form. She looked at the notary stamp and made a sound I had heard many times at the office. Low. Disgusted. Interested. This stamp is wrong. Expired? That too. But look at the border. Denise used a rectangular seal after 2018. This is her old round seal from before the commission change. Somebody used a scan. I sat back. Can you prove that? Miriam looked offended. Harold, I can prove what a man ate for lunch in 1997 if he filed it badly. For the first time in weeks, I almost smiled. Then she kept reading. Her face changed. This witness line. What about it? Celeste Vane Mercer. I saw. No. Look at the letter pressure. This is not original ink. This is a composite print. The signature was scanned onto the page, then notarized as if signed in person. The room went quiet. The little wall clock ticked above Miriam's china cabinet. Outside, a lawn mower started somewhere down the block, too cheerful for the moment. Miriam pushed the page back to me. Your wife did not sign this in front of Denise Calder. There are sentences that confirm what you fear and somehow still hurt like surprise. I closed my eyes. June's hand in mine. June asking if I trusted him. June saying paper remembers. When I opened my eyes, Miriam was already moving. She pulled notary records. Property records. Foundation filings. A preliminary transfer notice attached to my Briar Lane property. That one made my stomach turn. It was not complete. Not recorded yet. But a draft memorandum had been prepared. Donor intent alignment. Legacy site transition. Capacity support addendum pending. Miriam read the phrase twice. Capacity support addendum. She looked at me over her glasses. Harold, they are not just taking the house. They are preparing to say you cannot object. I knew that by then. But hearing Miriam say it made the air leave my lungs. Can we stop it? Maybe. But not by yelling. If you yell, you become their evidence. That was the trap. Old men are allowed to be victims as long as they are quiet. The second they shout, everyone starts measuring their sanity instead of the crime. Miriam made copies. Then more copies. Then copies of copies because distrust was her religion. She told me to go to the memorial dinner. Let them think you are exactly where they placed you. And do what? Listen. Watch the pens. Watch the folders. Watch who hovers when you drink. I did not like the last part. She looked at me. You said Sophie mentioned tea. White tea. Miriam's face hardened. Then you do not drink anything they hand you. I thought that was the end of the plan. It was not. Miriam looked at the clock, then at the stack of copied pages, then at me. You have 3 days before the memorial dinner, she said. We use all 3. For what? For making sure that when they call you confused, the paper calls them liars. There are people who comfort you when your life breaks. Then there are people who start labeling folders. Miriam was the second kind. Thank God. She made a list on a yellow legal pad. Notary trail. Insurance trail. Property trail. Capacity trail. Witness trail. Child risk. Then she underlined child risk twice. Because that is where they are weakest, she said. Sophie. Yes. But not because we use her. Because they already did. That sentence sat between us. I wanted to deny it. I could not. The next morning, we drove to the county archive annex. I had spent half my life in that building, but walking in as a man looking for proof against his own son made the fluorescent lights feel colder. The new clerks did not know me well. They knew the legend of me. The old man who could find a deed by remembering the widow's maiden name. The old man who made developers redo filings because a comma changed ownership. The old man who retired with no party because he said cake in a records office was how paper got ants. One of them, a young man named Evan, looked nervous when I asked for access to older notary commission logs. Miriam leaned across the counter. Evan, sweetheart, either you help us pull public records or I start explaining to your supervisor how you index the Lancaster Quarry easement under quarry with 1 R. He turned pale. Miriam smiled. We all grow through correction. 10 minutes later, we had the logs. Denise Calder's commission had ended cleanly. No renewal. No emergency extension. No temporary authority. The stamp on June's insurance form was not a mistake. It was a resurrection. Somebody had brought a dead seal back to life because dead women and dead seals cannot object. Then we checked the property side. That was worse. A memorandum of future charitable transfer had been drafted by a filing service called Brightline Elder Solutions. I had never heard of it. Miriam had. She made the same low sound as before. Brightline is not a filing service. It is a paper laundry. I looked at her. A what? A place people use when they want documents to look like they came from neutral administration instead of someone's kitchen table. The contact address for Brightline led to a mail suite in Harrisburg. The listed compliance consultant was Lyle Greer. That name appeared again on the capacity support draft. Dr. Lyle Greer. Psychiatric consultant. Elder transition evaluator. I read the title and felt my stomach tighten. Miriam saw it. You know him? No. You will soon. We pulled every public court reference to Lyle Greer. There were not many. That was how people like him survived. He did not appear as a villain. He appeared as a neutral voice in the background of family disputes. One guardianship petition for a widow with 2 sons fighting over a farm. One capacity letter in a trust challenge. One advisory note in a senior living transition case. Always soft language. Cognitive pressure. Decision fatigue. Protective oversight. Family-supported transition. The phrases were smooth enough to pass through a judge's eyes without leaving splinters. But I had read enough ugly documents to hear what they were avoiding. Control. 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 Miriam printed the references. Then she wrote one sentence on top. This man writes cages. I wanted to call Adrian right then. I wanted to ask him if he had already spoken to Dr. Greer. I wanted to hear his lie live. Miriam said no before I said anything. Do not call him. I did not say I would. Your face filed the request. She was right. So we kept moving. At lunch, we went to the old quilting shop. June's shop. It had been closed since her death, but I still owned the building. Or so I hoped. The bell over the door gave its little tired ring when I unlocked it. Dust moved in the sunlight. The shelves were mostly empty now. A few bolts of fabric remained because I had not had the heart to clear them. Blue cotton. Cream muslin. A roll of red binding tape June used for labels. The back room smelled faintly of steam even after all that time. Memory is stubborn in small rooms. I stood there too long. Miriam let me. Then she said, where would she hide something if she expected you to be slow and Adrian to be arrogant? That was exactly the right question. June knew me. She knew I would grieve clumsily. She knew I might not search until forced. She knew Adrian would search for money, documents, and jewelry. He would not search where meaning looked like clutter. We opened drawers. Checked patterns. Lifted the mat under the cutting table. Looked inside the old iron case. Nothing. Then Miriam stared at the wall of thread racks. What did Sophie say? Grandma said red means stop. Miriam reached for a spool of red quilting thread. The rack behind it moved slightly. A false back. My heart began to pound. Behind the panel was a small cloth pouch. Inside it were 2 things. A brass key. And a strip of fabric with 7 stitched numbers. No note. No explanation. Just June, assuming I would eventually become less stupid. Miriam looked at the numbers. Safe deposit box. How do you know? Because nobody stitches a grocery list unless they are insane or married to you. We went to the bank next. The safe deposit clerk was new. Too new. She looked at the key. Looked at the name. Typed something. Her professional expression turned careful. That careful look again. The look people get when the screen tells them to be polite around trouble. I am sorry, Mr. Mercer, she said. Access to this box is currently restricted pending estate review. Miriam's eyes sharpened. What estate review? I cannot disclose internal notes. I leaned on the counter. I am the surviving spouse. Yes, sir. The box is in my wife's name and mine. She swallowed. Originally, yes. Originally. Miriam placed both hands on the counter. Evanet County was smarter than you, and he indexed Quarry wrong. Choose your next sentence with ambition. The clerk disappeared into the back. A manager came out. He had the exhausted face of a man who had chosen banking because he disliked conflict and was now being punished by the universe. He explained that a request had been submitted by Mercer Continuum Living Charitable Holdings to review the box for foundation-related materials. Not open it. Review it. A word with gloves on. The request included a letter from Dr. Lyle Greer stating that Harold Mercer might be experiencing grief-related confusion and that family-supervised access to sensitive estate materials was advised. There it was. I had not even objected yet, and they were already making my objection look like decline. Miriam asked for a copy. The manager hesitated. I said, I am the account holder. Either print it or explain to the police why a charity tried to restrict a surviving spouse from his own box using a medical letter from a man who has never met him. He printed it. I read it with my hands flat on the counter. The letter described me as emotionally volatile. It said I had recently shown signs of fixation around property. It recommended all estate review be conducted with Adrian Mercer present. It was dated 2 days before the memorial dinner invitation was mailed. 2 days. They had timed everything. First the fog. Then the invitation. Then the tea. Then the signature. Miriam put the letter into a folder labeled Greer. She used capital letters. That meant war. The manager allowed us into the vault after a phone call with the bank's legal department. He did not apologize. He just became very helpful in that frightened banking way. The safe deposit box opened with a metal scrape that sounded too loud in the little room. Inside were old savings bonds, June's mother's wedding certificate, a small velvet pouch, and another red envelope. My hands shook when I picked it up. Miriam did not touch me. She just said, read. The envelope said one word. If. Inside was a short note. If you are here with Miriam, I am glad. If you are here with Adrian, put this back and pretend you found nothing. If you are here alone, Harold, stop being proud and call Miriam. I almost smiled. Then I saw the second page. It was a handwritten list of dates. 3 visits from Adrian. 2 from Celeste. 1 from a man June identified only as the careful doctor. Beside each date, June had written what they asked her to sign. Insurance change. Foundation authorization. Property intent letter. Medical release. Then at the bottom, 1 sentence. I refused all of it. I sat down in the little bank chair. The page blurred. Not because I could not read it. Because I could. There are times when proof does not comfort. It only confirms how lonely someone was while trying to leave it. June had been dying, and still she was documenting the siege. Miriam took the page gently and slid it into a clear sleeve. This is good, she said. I looked at her. Good? Yes. It hurts because it is good. That was true. Good evidence is often terrible news. The velvet pouch held June's wedding ring. Not the one she wore. The original thin gold band from our courthouse ceremony, before I could afford anything better. I had not seen it in years. Inside the pouch was a tiny folded receipt from a jeweler. Not for repair. For engraving. The inside of the ring had been engraved with another set of numbers. Miriam stared at it. Another box. No, I said. I knew those numbers. They were not a bank code. They were a book and page reference. County Deed Records. Book 1847. Page 219. I knew because 1847 was the year the old mill parcel had first been recorded. June had sent me back to the beginning of the house. Back at the annex, we pulled book 1847, page 219. The original mill parcel deed. Then book 2210. Then 3318. Then 4027. Chain of title. Step by step. Owner to owner. Family to family. Until Briar Lane reached us. At first, I did not understand what June wanted me to see. Then Miriam pointed. Read the restriction. I leaned closer. The old deed had a covenant attached to the rear acre. The land containing the lavender garden and the old well could not be used for commercial, medical, industrial, or institutional purposes without unanimous consent of all living direct descendants of the original grantor's line or a court ruling dissolving the covenant. It was obscure. Old. Probably forgotten by every developer who had ever called us. But it was still there. June had found it. Maybe years ago. Maybe when Adrian first began circling the house. The point was clear. Even if they got my signature, the June house project could be challenged. Unless I was declared incompetent and Adrian controlled my consent. Unless Sophie was pushed into silence. Unless the court believed the family was united. The memorial dinner was not symbolic. It was the first domino in a legal path around the old covenant. Miriam sat back and whispered, "That clever woman." I closed my eyes. June had not just left emotion. She had left strategy. A dead woman's counterattack written through old paper, red thread, and the one man who had spent his life reading land records. That afternoon, I went to see my doctor. Not because I was sick. Because I needed the fog cleared before they released it. Dr. Patel had been my physician for 11 years. He was a calm man with square glasses and a talent for telling people unpleasant truths without making them feel insulted. When I showed him Greer's letter, his face changed. "This was not requested through my office," he said. "I know. Have you ever met Dr. Greer?" "No." "Has he evaluated you?" "No." "Then this is not medicine. This is theater." He printed my cognitive screening from my last wellness exam. Normal. He performed another screening that day. Normal. He wrote a letter stating I was oriented, capable of managing my affairs, and had no diagnosis that would support restricted access to estate records. Then he paused. "Harold, I need to ask this carefully. Do you feel safe at the memorial dinner?" The question should have sounded dramatic. It did not. It sounded practical. I thought of the tea. The quiet room. The folder. Sophie. "No," I said. He nodded. "Then do not go alone." By evening, our folders had grown into a box. Miriam called it the ugly quilt. Every square connected to another square. Insurance. House. Capacity. Doctor. T. Sophie. Foundation pledge. Old covenant. It was all there. But something was still missing. Voice. We had June's notes. We had documents. We had suspicion. But Adrian and Celeste still had room to say misunderstanding, grief, complex estate planning, charitable intent. They needed to be caught in their own language. Miriam said that at 8:30 while eating soup from a mug because she said bowls were optimism. We need them talking. To who? Someone they still think they can manage. I knew the answer before she said it. Me. The next morning, I called Adrian. Not to accuse. To wobble. That was Miriam's word. I hated it. You do not have to enjoy the bait, she said. Just hold still while they bite. Adrian answered on the second ring. Dad. Everything okay? Concern. Soft. Ready. I let my voice sound tired. I have been thinking about the house. Silence. Then gentle warmth. I am glad. I know this has been heavy. Maybe I reacted too strongly. No, Dad. You are grieving. We all understand. Miriam sat across from me with a recorder on the table, rolling her eyes so hard June would have applauded. I said, I do not want to disappoint your mother. That did it. His voice changed. Softer. Closer. You cannot disappoint her by trusting me. There was the hook. He began guiding. The house would become a sanctuary. My role would be honored. I would not need to worry about maintenance. A transition consultant could help me with the emotional part. The family blessing was just a public gesture. The documents were protective. He used the word protective 9 times in 12 minutes. Then he said, if you feel overwhelmed, Celeste has something mild from Dr. Greer. Just tea, really. It helps with nerves. We do not want your hands shaking on camera and people misunderstanding. Miriam wrote a word on her pad. Got him. I kept my voice small. Would people think I am not well? Adrian sighed. Not irritated. Sad. Performed sadness. Dad, some people already worry. You have been alone. You get fixed on things. The house. Mom's papers. Old records. That is why the blessing matters. It shows everyone we are together. Together. Meaning absorbed. Together. Meaning silent. Together. Meaning my objection had been domesticated. I thanked him. Then hung up. For a while, neither Miriam nor I spoke. The recorder sat between us. Finally Miriam said, I want to hit him with a stapler. That would be assault. So is some paperwork. She was right in spirit. We copied the audio. Twice. That evening, Sophie called again. This time, her voice was almost too quiet to hear. Grandpa. I am here. Mom is mad. My stomach tightened. At you? No. At the red thing. What red thing? The one Grandma gave me. She said if I lose it, I cannot sit by you. I gripped the phone. Sweetheart, listen to me. You do not need to bring anything else. You already did enough. Grandma said 3. My throat closed. Where are the others? I hid one. I have one. Mom found one but it was empty because I switched it. June's blood. All courage and clever hands. Where did you hide it? In my book with the fox. I had no idea what that meant. She added, if I cannot give it to you, ask about the fox. Then I heard Celeste's voice in the background. Who are you talking to? Sophie said, much louder, Grandpa asked if I want pancakes. Then the line went dead. I sat with the phone in my hand. Miriam leaned forward. What fox? I do not know. Then find out before the memorial dinner. I did. The next day, I went to the independent bookstore near the square and bought every children's fox book I could find. 14 of them. Miriam called that the least efficient search warrant in history. But one cover caught me. A fox in a red scarf standing beside a winter tree. Sophie had carried that book at June's last Christmas. I drove to the school under the excuse of dropping off a book from Grandma's house. The receptionist called Sophie down. She came into the office small and careful, eyes moving from me to the receptionist to the hall. I held out the fox book. Her face changed. Not enough for the receptionist. Enough for me. She hugged the book to her chest. Then she whispered into my coat, page 11. That was all. That night, I opened page 11. Inside, between 2 glued pages, was the 3rd red envelope. The one she would later open at the memorial dinner. If they say Grandpa is confused, ask why Mom made me practice saying he forgets things. But there was another line below it. Ask why Dad says the old doctor only needs one bad video. One bad video. The final piece of the trap. They did not only want me sedated enough to sign. They wanted me filmed. Emotional. Unsteady. Maybe angry. One clip. One bad video to support Greer's letter. One bad video to freeze my access to records, sell the house, and explain away everything I said after. I did not sleep that night either. But it was not fear keeping me up. It was discipline. I wrote down everything I knew. Then I wrote down everything I did not know. That second list was more important. Who had the original June recording? Where was the thread box now? Would Adrian try to isolate me before the signing? Would Celeste bring Greer? Would Malcolm protect his daughter or his name? Would Sophie be safe after speaking? Would the police move before the signature or after? At dawn, Miriam arrived with burnt coffee and a black dress in a garment bag. "I am coming," she said. I did not ask. "Because you are not completely foolish." She had already spoken with Detective Albright through an old contact. Not a full police operation yet. Not enough for arrests. Enough for presence nearby if the evidence turned live. Enough for someone official to receive a copy of the June notes before the memorial dinner began. Enough so that if I disappeared into a quiet room, people would ask why. That was the best we could do. Truth rarely enters a room with perfect backup. Sometimes it enters with an old woman in black, a recorder in her purse, and a dead wife's handwriting. The day of the memorial dinner, I dressed slowly. White shirt. Dark suit. June's favorite tie, red with tiny blue flowers. My hands were steady until I reached for my wedding ring. Then they were not. I stood in front of the mirror and saw a man I did not fully recognize. Older than I felt. Thinner. Angrier. But not confused. That mattered. I put Dr. Patel's capacity letter in my inside pocket. I put copies of the insurance form in the left pocket. I put the red envelope from the Fox book in the right. Then I looked toward the empty side of the bedroom. "I am late," I said. The room gave no answer. I said, "But not too late." Then I left for the Glasshouse Conservatory. The memorial dinner was held at the Glasshouse Conservatory, a converted botanical hall attached to the old Ashbury estate. June would have hated it. Too many mirrors. Too much white linen. Flowers arranged like they were being held hostage. A fountain in the center of the room, its water lit blue from underneath so it looked expensive and slightly ill. I arrived at 6:30 in my dark suit, the one June had chosen for our 50th anniversary dinner. It still held a faint cedar smell from the closet. Or maybe I imagined that because I needed her near me. At the entrance, a young woman with a headset checked my name and smiled too brightly. "Mr. Mercer, we are so honored you are here. Your family has arranged a quiet room for you if the evening becomes overwhelming." There it was. The soft cage. "I am fine," I said. Her smile did not change. "Of course. We just want you comfortable." Comfortable is what they call controlled when the carpet is nice. I stepped inside. The room turned slightly toward me. Not everyone. Enough. People knew who I was. The widower. The symbol. The man expected to bless the taking of his own home. Adrian crossed the room with arms open. He looked perfect. Navy tuxedo. Silver tie. Hair trimmed close. The kind of grief face rich men practice in mirrors because real grief is too messy for sponsors. "Dad," he said, loud enough for nearby donors. "You made it." As if there had been doubt. As if my presence were a small victory for his patience. He hugged me. His hand pressed my back once. A signal to someone behind me, maybe. Celeste appeared with the white tea. "Harold, we had this prepared for you. No alcohol tonight. Adrian said you have not been sleeping well." I looked at the cup. Steam curled from the pale liquid. It smelled faintly floral. "Kind," I said. I took it. Did not drink. Sophie stood 10 feet away in a black dress with a red ribbon at the waist. Her eyes were fixed on the cup. Too wide. Too still. When Celeste turned to greet a donor, I lowered the cup onto a passing tray and let it go. Sophie's shoulders dropped 1 inch. Enough. At dinner, they placed me at the front table between Sophie and Malcolm Vane. Malcolm was 80, tall, thin, and still terrifying in the way old lawyers can be when they have spent decades being useful to people with secrets. He wore a black suit and a hearing aid so small it looked like a polished seed. He greeted me politely. "Mr. Mercer. I admired your wife. Did you know her?" "Through Celeste. Through the foundation. Then you admired the brochure." He glanced at me. For 1 second, amusement touched his mouth. Then it vanished. Perhaps. I did not trust him. But I noticed something. He was watching Celeste more than he was watching me. Not proudly. Carefully. Dinner began. Speeches followed. A hospital executive spoke about compassionate futures. A donor spoke about legacy. Celeste spoke about women's dignity near the end of life and never once mentioned that June preferred cheap diner pancakes to formal charity language. Then Adrian took the stage. He looked out over the room with wet eyes he could summon like an actor. "My mother believed no one should face their final days alone," he said. That was true. He used truth the way thieves use house keys. He spoke of June House. He spoke of the land. He spoke of family unity. Then he looked at me. "Tonight my father will join me in signing the Mercer family blessing, officially beginning the transition of our family home into a sanctuary for others." Applause rose around me. Soft. Moved. Already convinced. Sophie slipped the red envelope under my plate while everyone clapped. Her hand shook. I covered it with my napkin. She leaned close without looking at me. "Grandpa, do not drink the white tea. Mom says it makes your hands soft before you sign." Then she sat back, face forward, hands in her lap like a child in a photograph. I opened the envelope under the table. Inside was a small card cut from quilt paper. "Harold, I did not sign." On the back, in smaller writing. "Fred Box has the voice. Trust Miriam." I stared at the words. Not because I doubted them. Because they were proof that June had known. She had known enough to prepare. She had known enough to hide something. And somehow, through Sophie, she had reached the table before Adrian's pen did. The applause faded. Adrian stepped down from the stage and walked toward me with a leather folder. Celeste followed with another cup of tea. This one had a lid. "Dad," Adrian said, still smiling for the room, "we will just do the ceremonial part now. Very simple." The folder opened. On top sat a cream page with June's photo watermark. Below it, I saw tabs. 3 of them. Sign here. Initial here. Acknowledge here. My fingers went cold. I smiled. That surprised him. "Good. Adrian," I said, loud enough for the table, "your mother always hated signing anything without reading it." A few people laughed politely. Adrian's smile held. "Of course. This is just symbolic. Then it can wait until after my toast." His eyes sharpened. Only for a second. Celeste stepped in. "Harold, the program is timed. The donor announcement depends on the signature moment. Then they can enjoy the suspense." Malcolm Vane made a small sound beside me. Not quite a laugh. Adrian leaned closer. His voice dropped. "Dad, do not do this tonight." There he was. Not the son. The manager. I looked at him and thought of the expired notary stamp. The cropped photograph. The stolen policy. The red envelope. Then I looked at Sophie. She was staring at her plate. A child should not have to pass evidence under a memorial dinner table. That was the moment my last hesitation died. I stood. The room quieted because old men at memorial dinners are allowed a certain amount of ceremony. Adrian's face changed again. He thought I was obeying. I walked to the stage. Slowly. Not because I was weak. Because every step needed to feel deliberate. The microphone waited beneath June's portrait. In the photo, she was smiling in the quilt shop. Again, I was cropped out. I touched the frame once. Then I looked at the crowd. 200 faces. Donors. Lawyers. Executives. Neighbors. People who had come to watch a family bless a theft without knowing what it was. My wife June, I began, made quilts. Most of you know that because my son has put it in every brochure. Soft laughter. Adrian stood near the front, still holding the folder. Celeste stood beside him with the tea. But a quilt is not just pretty fabric. It is a record. Every piece comes from somewhere. Every seam has a reason. If one square is wrong, the whole thing pulls crooked. June could see a crooked seam from across the room. I looked at Adrian. She could see a crooked person faster. The room shifted. There are sounds people make when they realize a speech has left the approved road. Chairs creak. Glasses pause. Someone coughs as if etiquette can clear danger from the air. Adrian moved toward the stage. I lifted one hand. Let me finish. I am old, not finished. That got another laugh, weaker this time. Then the house lights flickered. Not off. Just down. The screen behind me changed from June's portrait to the foundation logo. Then to black. For one heartbeat, I thought Adrian had cut the presentation. Then I heard a familiar voice from the speakers. June. Thin. Tired. But clear. Harold, if you are hearing this, it means I was right, and I am so sorry. The room froze. My chest seized so hard I almost grabbed the podium. I had not played the voice. I had not found the recording yet. I turned toward the sound booth. Miriam stood there in a black coat, one hand on the laptop, cigarette tucked behind her ear despite every indoor rule God and man ever wrote. She had found the thread box. She had trusted the timing. And June had reached the room. June's voice continued. Adrian asked me to sign a change to the insurance policy. I refused. Celeste asked again when the pain was bad. I refused. If there is a paper saying I gave my life insurance to the foundation, it is false. If there is a paper saying Briar Lane should become June House, it is false. I love helping people. I do not love being used to rob my husband. A woman's gasp cut through the room. Adrian's face emptied. Celeste did not move at all. That scared me more. June coughed on the recording. Then breathed. Harold, look for the red envelopes. I gave Sophie one because children are the only people thieves underestimate. I am sorry for putting anything on her. I did not know how else to get past them. Trust Miriam. Do not drink anything before you read. Do not sign anything until the paper has been copied twice. And Harold, listen to me. Our son is not lost. He chose. The recording clicked. Silence. No violin. No glasses. No polite movement. Only the fountain in the center of the room, pouring blue water into blue light like nothing had happened. I gripped the podium. For a moment, I was not the man exposing a crime. I was just a husband hearing his wife protect me from beyond the last place I could reach her. Then Adrian shouted. Turn that off. Too late. The first recording had done what truth does best. It changed where everyone looked. Not at me anymore. At him. Celeste recovered first. This is a private family matter, she said, voice sharp but controlled. Harold is grieving. That recording has clearly been edited. Miriam's voice came from the sound booth. Try that sentence in court, sweetheart. I brought the original device. People turned. Miriam lifted June's red sewing box like a priest raising evidence. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny. Because June would have loved that part. Adrian stepped onto the stage. He reached for my arm. I pulled back. Dad, he said, low now, desperate. You do not understand what you are doing. I leaned toward the microphone. I understand exactly. Then I opened the folder he had brought me. The top page was not ceremonial. It was a property transition acknowledgement. Below it, a consent to independent capacity review. Below that, a limited power of attorney. There it was. The whole cage in cream paper. I held the pages up. My son asked me to sign these tonight after drinking tea his wife insisted I have. He called it symbolic. The first page begins the transfer of my home. The second page supports a review of my mental capacity. The third gives him authority to act for me if I am declared unable. The room erupted. Not loudly at first. Whispers. Gasps. Chairs scraping. Donors turning to attorneys. Attorneys turning to exits. Hospital executives doing the special math of public disgrace. Adrian lunged for the folder. Malcolm Vane rose from his seat. At 80 years old, he moved slowly. But his voice cut through the room like a judge's gavel. Adrian. Do not touch that paper. Adrian stopped. That was when I understood Malcolm was not fully inside the lie. Or if he was, he had just realized his daughter had built a fire too close to his name. Celeste turned toward him. Dad. He did not look at her. He looked at the documents in my hand. Harold, he said, may I see the folder? I did not trust him. But I knew a room like this needed another authority to keep the truth from sounding like grief. I handed him copies. Not originals. June had taught me. Paper copied twice. Malcolm read fast. His face did not change much. Only his mouth tightened at the corners. Then he looked at Celeste. Not as a father. As an attorney seeing liability. Who drafted this capacity addendum? Celeste said nothing. Adrian answered too fast. It was standard planning language. Malcolm turned a page. This is not standard. The room heard that. Everyone did. I saw the hospital executive in the front row close his binder. That little motion sounded like a door locking. Then Sophie stood. No one expected it. I certainly did not. She was so small between all those adults, red ribbon at her waist, face pale but steady. She held up another red envelope. Grandma gave me 3, she said. Celeste's head snapped toward her. Sophie, sit down. Sophie flinched. Then looked at me. I nodded once. She opened the envelope. Her voice shook as she read. If they say Grandpa is confused, ask why Mom made me practice saying he forgets things. A sound moved through the room that I cannot describe. Not a gasp. Not a murmur. Something uglier. Recognition. Celeste crossed toward Sophie. Enough. Malcolm stepped into her path. No. One word. Cold. Final. For the first time all night, Celeste looked afraid. Adrian looked worse. He looked exposed. There is a difference. Fear still hopes for escape. Exposure knows the room has seen the shape of you. Miriam pressed another key. The screen filled with documents. Insurance beneficiary form. Notary commission dates. June's medical timeline. The draft property transfer. The capacity addendum. Miriam had built a presentation. Of course she had. She once made a county commissioner cry with a spreadsheet. For those who enjoy paper, she said into the sound booth microphone, the expired notary stamp is on the left. The live commission record is on the right. The witness signature attached to the insurance change appears to be scanned, not inked. The property transition draft was created 8 days before Mrs. Mercer died, although the family was told it was prepared 6 months later. A man near the back said, "My God." Miriam said, "He is not on the filing." June would have laughed. I could not. I looked at Adrian. His eyes were wet now, but not with grief. With calculation failing. He stepped toward me again. "Dad, please." That word. Please. After all of it. As if politeness could cover the hole he had dug. I leaned into the microphone. No. Just that. No. The strongest word I should have used years earlier. Then the side doors opened. 2 county detectives entered with a woman in a gray suit I recognized from the district attorney's office. Miriam had not only found the thread box. She had called people with badges. Adrian saw them and changed completely. The sun vanished. The businessman vanished. What remained was panic in a tuxedo. He turned toward Celeste. "You said this was sealed." The microphone caught it. The whole room heard. Celeste's face hardened. "Do not say another word." Too late again. The detective closest to the stage said, "Mr. Mercer, step away from the documents." For one wild second I thought he meant me. Then Adrian moved. Not toward the exit. Toward Sophie. Maybe to grab the envelope. Maybe to pull her away. Maybe only because cornered people run toward leverage. I stepped between them. I am old. My knees hurt in the rain. My right hand sometimes locks in the morning. But in that moment I moved faster than I had in years. "No," I said again. This time not into the microphone. To my son. He stopped inches from me. His face twisted. "You have no idea what I did for this family." I looked at him. "You sold it." He shook his head. "I saved it. Mom was dying. You were useless. The bills were eating everything. I turned her name into something that could survive." The detective froze. The room froze. Adrian did not realize he was still standing near a live microphone. Or maybe some part of him no longer cared. He pointed at the screen. "That insurance money built all of this. Without me, her name would be a quilt shop and a grave. I made her matter." A sound came out of me then. Not a word. Not quite a breath. Something old and broken. Because for 1 second, I wanted to hit him. I wanted the simple justice of flesh and bone. But June had not left me evidence so I could become small at the end. She had left me the truth. So I held still. Celeste reached him and grabbed his arm. "Stop talking." He pulled away. "No. He wants to act like a victim. Ask him where he was when Mom needed decisions. Crying in the kitchen. Hiding in the laundry room. I signed what had to be signed because he could not even answer the phone." Malcolm Vane spoke from the front row. "Adrian, did June Mercer sign the insurance change?" Adrian turned toward him. The room held its breath. Celeste whispered, "Do not." Adrian laughed once. Ugly. Lost. She would have. There it was. Not yes. Not no. The moral confession of every thief. She would have. The detective stepped forward. "Mr. Mercer, come with us." Adrian looked at me then. Really looked. For the first time that night, he saw not an obstacle, not a symbol, not a signature. He saw his father. And still, there was no apology in him. Only hatred that I had refused to stay useful. "You ruined everything," he said. I answered quietly. "No. I arrived after the ruin." They took him by the arms. Celeste tried to move away. Malcolm caught her wrist, not roughly, but firmly enough that she stopped. The woman from the district attorney's office approached her with another officer. "Mrs. Mercer, we need to speak with you as well." Celeste looked at her father. "For help. For rescue. For the old privilege of being a Vane." Malcolm looked back with a face made of stone. "Answer them carefully," he said. "And without using my name." That was the first punishment Celeste received. Not cuffs. Not charges. Her father's refusal to become her exit. They led Adrian and Celeste toward the side doors. The room watched. No applause. No music. No dramatic shouting. Only the sound of expensive shoes on polished stone and the fountain still pouring its ridiculous blue water into itself. Then Sophie ran to me. She hit my chest with both arms and held on like a child who had finally reached land. I wrapped one arm around her and kept the other on the podium because grief, rage, relief, and age had chosen the same moment to collect their bill. I looked at June's face on the screen. Miriam had paused the recording on a still image from the sewing room. June looked thinner than I wanted to remember. But her eyes were clear. Clear as the day she told me paper remembers. I whispered, "You were right." Sophie heard me. She whispered back, "Grandma said you would be late but not too late." That almost broke me. Not because it was sweet. Because it was exactly the kind of thing June would say. The memorial dinner did not end. It dissolved. Donors left in clusters. Attorneys stayed longer than anyone else because attorneys like to be near disasters they did not cause. Hospital executives issued phrases about pausing commitments and reviewing governance. The caterers cleared plates nobody had finished. The violinist packed her instrument with the solemn dignity of a person who knew she had witnessed something no music could improve. I sat in a side room with Sophie, Miriam, Malcolm Vane, and 2 detectives. The red sewing box sat on the table. The folder sat beside it. The teacup Celeste had given me had been bagged as evidence. I did not ask what was in it that night. Part of me did not want to know before Sophie was out of the room. Detective Albright, the woman in the gray suit, asked me when I first suspected the documents were false. I told her about June's question. The insurance letter. The notary stamp. The red envelope. Sophie told them what she had heard. Celeste telling Adrian that the white tea would make Grandpa easier. Adrian telling Celeste that I could be guided through the signatures if the room stayed emotional. Celeste making Sophie practice saying I forgot things. Each sentence came out of that child like a stone dropped into a well. I hated every adult in that room, including myself, for letting her carry those stones. When Sophie finished, Malcolm Vane closed his eyes. For a long moment, he looked every minute of 80 years old. Then he opened them and said, "I will arrange independent counsel for the child. Not through my office. Not through Celeste." I looked at him. "Why should I trust you?" He nodded once. "You should not. Trust the court order." That was the most honest thing he had said all night. I respected it more than comfort. By midnight, I was home. Miriam drove me because she said my hands were shaking and she had not survived county parking politics for 26 years to die in my passenger seat. The house at Briar Lane was dark when we pulled in. The red maple moved in the wind. For a second, I could not get out of the car. Everything looked the same. That felt impossible. A house should look different after it almost gets stolen. A garden should glow when a dead woman's voice saves it. A front door should know when it has been rescued. But the porch light was just the porch light. The mailbox leaned the same way. The lavender bed slept under mulch. Miriam turned off the engine. "You going to sit here all night?" "Maybe." June would call that dramatic. June is dead. Miriam looked at me. "Yes. And apparently still better at paperwork than everybody else. I laughed then. A real laugh. Small. Painful. But real. Then I cried. Miriam did not touch my shoulder. She knew me well enough not to. She sat beside me in the dark until the worst of it passed. When I finally went inside, the house felt too quiet. Not empty. Accusing. The kitchen light came on with the same tired flicker it had made for years. June used to say we should replace the fixture. I used to say it still worked. That was our whole marriage in one argument. She wanted things better. I wanted things to last. Both of us were right often enough to be annoying. I placed the red envelope on the table. Then the copies. Then Dr. Patel's letter. Then the small velvet pouch with her first wedding ring. I lined everything up like exhibits. Miriam watched from the doorway. "You are doing the clerk thing," she said. "What thing?" "Making rectangles because emotions are not square enough." I looked down. She was right. I had arranged the papers by size. Not importance. Size. As if neatness could keep my heart from making any more noise. Miriam took off her coat and put water on for tea. Not white tea. Plain black. Strong enough to make regret sit upright. She opened the cabinet without asking because she had known us too long to perform guest manners. Then she stopped. In the cabinet, behind the mugs, was June's old tin of lemon drops. I had not moved it since she died. Miriam touched the lid once. Then shut the cabinet again. "Not tonight," she said. I understood. Some memories can wait until morning. Others walk in without permission. The phone rang at 1:17. Unknown number. Miriam and I looked at it. Neither of us moved for the first 2 rings. On the third, I answered. It was Malcolm Vane. His voice was lower than it had been at the memorial dinner. Less polished. More human, which made me trust him less and pity him more. "Mr. Mercer, Sophie is safe." Those were the only words he could have used to keep me on the line. "Where?" "With my sister Eleanor. The court will be notified first thing in the morning." Detective Albright approved the immediate placement for the night. "Does Celeste know?" "She is currently answering questions." "She knows enough." I sat down. My knees had stopped negotiating. "Did Sophie ask for me?" "Yes." That hit harder than I expected. Malcolm continued. "I told her you would see her tomorrow after adults finish making a mess less messy." That sounded like something June would have tolerated. "What do you want, Mr. Vane?" A pause. "I want to know whether my office name appears on any document shown tonight." "It appears near the capacity addendum." "Near or on?" "Near." Another pause. That one was sharp. Then Celeste used template language from my closed files. I did not answer. He heard the silence. "I am not asking you to comfort me, Harold." "Good. I am out of comfort. I am asking you to preserve every copy." "Already done." "Of course." For 1 second, his voice carried something like respect. Then he said, "My daughter is many things. Careless is not one of them. If she used old language, she believed nobody would check the history. That means she relied on people seeing you as too weak to read. She was wrong." "Yes," he said. "And that may be the most expensive mistake she ever made." The call ended soon after. Miriam poured tea. What did the old crocodile want? To know whether his name was on the documents. Of course he did. Do you think he knew? Miriam sat across from me. People like Malcolm Vane know many things without knowing them officially. But tonight he looked surprised in the only way that matters. He realized the fire could reach him. That was not innocence. But it was leverage. By 2 in the morning, Detective Albright came to the house. Not with sirens. Not with drama. Just a gray sedan in the driveway and a knock that made my entire body tense. She stood on the porch with a folder under one arm and eyes that looked like she had already done too much paperwork for one lifetime. "Mr. Mercer, I need the original red envelope if you have it." I invited her in. She refused tea. Miriam liked her immediately for not pretending the hour was social. We sat at the kitchen table. Albright bagged the envelope. Photographed the handwriting. Asked me to describe, slowly, every moment from arrival to arrest. Not emotionally. Chronologically. That was harder. Emotion remembers heat. Law wants order. So I gave her order. 6:30 arrival. White tea from Celeste. Quiet room comment from staff. Seating beside Sophie. Adrian speech. Envelope under plate. Signing folder. My refusal. Miriam's recording. June's voice. Sophie standing. Document display. Adrian confession. Celeste interference. Detectives entering. Adrian moving toward Sophie. Arrests. Albright wrote almost nothing. That bothered me. Then I realized she was recording. Of course. When I finished, she asked, "Did you know Mrs. Polk would play the recording?" "No." Miriam said, "I knew he would ruin the timing if I told him." Albright looked at her. Miriam looked back. The two women took each other's measure and seemed satisfied. Albright asked me for the copies of Dr. Patel's letter and Greer's bank restriction letter. I gave them to her. She read Greer's letter at the table. Her expression did not change. But the room felt colder. "This language is familiar," she said. Miriam leaned forward. "That is what I said." "To whom?" "Lyle Greer." Albright nodded slowly. "He has appeared around 3 cases we never liked but could not move." There it was. The thing I had felt at the annex. A pattern. A man who knew how to write cages. Albright did not say more. But she did not need to. By 3, she left with evidence bags. By 3:30, Miriam had fallen asleep in June's old chair with her mouth slightly open and one hand still on a folder. I covered her with a quilt. Then I went upstairs to June's sewing room. I do not know why. Maybe because after hearing her voice in public, I needed to stand somewhere her silence still belonged to me. The room looked exactly as before. Cutting table. Thread rack with the false panel open. A strip of blue cotton. Her glasses. I sat in her chair. It creaked under me. For 40 years, I had not understood how much of a person stays inside the objects they touched every day. Not the big things. Not jewelry. Not photographs. The ordinary tools. Scissors. Tape measure. Pincushion. A mug with tea stains inside. The little chalk pencil she used to mark fabric. I picked it up and held it like a relic. Then I saw the underside of the pincushion. A red thread knot. Not decorative. June never wasted knots. I turned the pincushion over. A slit had been cut into the bottom fabric. Inside was a folded square of paper so small it might have been missed forever. My name was on it. Harold. The writing was cramped. Weaker than the others. I opened it carefully. If Adrian cries, listen for blame. If Celeste smiles, look for the person she is signaling. If they use Sophie, protect the child before the house. If you cannot save everything, save what is alive. I read the last line until it changed me. Save what is alive. That was June's real instruction. Not the house first. Not the money. Not even her name. Sophie. Me. Whatever remained human after the paper war. I folded the note and held it against my chest. For the first time that night, I slept. Not long. But enough. At 9 the next morning, the first reporter knocked. Miriam answered the door in my robe, holding a mug of coffee, and said, "No." The reporter began a sentence. Miriam closed the door. That became the media policy. No. By 10, 3 more vans had passed slowly. By 11, a neighbor left muffins on the porch and did not ring. That kindness almost undid me. At noon, Detective Albright called. They had searched Adrian's car under consent after his attorney made the first of several poor decisions. Inside the trunk was a garment bag containing my spare suit jacket from the foundation office. I did not know it had been taken. In the pocket was a folded paper with my name practiced 6 times. Not signatures exactly. Signature starts. Loops pressure marks. Attempts. My stomach turned. They had not only prepared documents. They had prepared my hand. Maybe to guide it. Maybe to forge it if the T failed. Maybe both. Albright said, "There is more." The garment bag also contained a small tripod and phone mount. The kind used to record social media clips. One bad video. Sophie had been right. They planned to film me signing. Or struggling. Or crying. Or refusing. Whatever happened, they would shape it later. If I signed, it proved consent. If I wobbled, it proved incapacity. If I objected, it proved agitation. That was the elegance of the trap. Every outcome served them until June's voice entered the room. I told Albright about the note in the pincushion. She came back for it within the hour. Miriam watched the evidence bag leave and said, "Your wife was a better detective dying than most men are alive." Yes. Annoying woman. Yes. We both smiled. Then stopped because smiling still felt like trespass. In the afternoon, I visited Sophie at Eleanor Vane's house. Eleanor was Malcolm's older sister. 83. White hair. Straight back. The kind of old woman who made lace curtains look like a legal boundary. She opened the door, looked me up and down, and said, "You look like you were hit by a charity." I was. "Come in." Sophie sat in the sunroom with a blanket around her shoulders and a Fox book beside her. When she saw me, she stood too fast, then stopped, as if unsure whether she was allowed to run. That broke something small and sharp inside me. I opened my arms. She ran. I held her carefully. Children feel breakable after adults have used them. But Sophie held me hard enough to remind me she was still strong. "I did it wrong," she whispered. "No. I was supposed to give you the envelope before dinner, but Mom kept watching. You did it exactly when it mattered. Grandma said red means stop. I stopped." She pulled back. "Are they going to be mad forever?" That was a child's question. Not will they go to jail. Not what happens to the money. Will the people who made me afraid stay mad? Maybe, I said. But their anger is not your job. She nodded like she wanted that to be enough. It was not. Not yet. Eleanor brought tea. Brown tea. She announced that fact before placing it down. "Normal tea," she said. "No Mercer nonsense." I liked her. Sophie almost smiled. We sat together for an hour. She told me that Celeste had made her practice 3 sentences before the memorial dinner. Grandpa gets confused when he is tired. Grandpa said yes already. Grandpa wants Mom and Dad to help. She said Adrian stood in the doorway while she practiced. He did not correct Celeste. He did not stop it. He only said, "Make it sound natural." I had thought I was out of fresh anger. I was wrong. Fresh anger has roots. It finds water. When I left, Sophie asked if she could come to Briar Lane soon. I said yes. Eleanor said, after council approves. Sophie frowned. I said, after council approves. Eleanor nodded. I respected her more every minute. On the drive home, I passed the Glasshouse Conservatory. The parking lot was empty. Workers were loading flowers into a truck. White lilies. Dozens of them. Flowers from the memorial dinner. Flowers bought with stolen grief. I pulled over. Not planned. Not wise. Just necessary. A young worker recognized me and froze. I asked what they were doing with the flowers. He said most would be discarded. I asked if I could take some. He looked toward the building. Then back at me. Take all of them. So I did. Not the lilies. June hated lilies. Too funeral. Too proud. I took the red carnations from the side arrangements. They had been decoration, not symbol. I made them symbol. Back at Briar Lane, I placed them on the kitchen table, in the sewing room, on the porch, and finally beside the lavender bed. Miriam arrived while I was outside. She watched me lay the last flowers down. Stealing from your own crime scene. Repurposing. June would approve the thrift. June would say carnations are cheap. Also true. We stood in the cold garden. Then she said, Albright called me. What now? Foundation office search tomorrow. I looked at the house. At the lavender. At the red flowers. At the place Adrian had almost turned into a donor walkway. Good. The foundation office looked different under warrant. The first time I saw it, the glass walls had seemed polished. Now they seemed transparent in the worst possible way. Desks. Files. Donor plaques waiting in boxes. June's cropped photograph near reception. A slogan painted on the wall. Dignity deserves a home. I wanted to tear it down with my hands. Albright did not let me touch anything. Miriam came as a records witness. I came as owner of several documents and surviving spouse. That was the official reason. The real reason was that Albright understood rooms tell stories if the right person knows what is missing. Adrian's office was immaculate. Too immaculate. Men who hide things well either bury them deep or display a surface so clean people feel rude looking harder. Celeste's office was different. Also neat. But active. Folders arranged by color. Calendars. Event scripts. Donor biographies. Media plans. A list of emotional beats for the memorial dinner. That phrase was written at the top. Emotional beats. Welcome with June portrait. Widower seated front left. Grandchild visible. White tea before donor book. Legacy video. Signature. Standing ovation. Family photo. Every word was a nail. Grandchild visible. Not Sophie. Grandchild. A prop category. White tea before donor book. There it was in ink. Albright photographed it. Miriam looked like she might bite through her own cheek. Then we found a folder labeled Harold Mercer support. Harold Mercer. Me. Inside were notes about my habits. Coffee in the morning. Church twice monthly. Blood pressure medication. Dislikes hospitals. Strong identity tied to records office. Likely to resist if rushed. Responds to references to June's wishes. May soften if Sophie initiates contact. I read that last line 3 times. May soften if Sophie initiates contact. They had studied my love like a lock. They had studied Sophie as the key. I had to step out into the hallway. Albright followed. You do not have to keep reading. Yes, I said. I do. Why? Because if I do not see the whole thing, some part of me will keep trying to make it smaller. She did not argue. Good detective. Back inside, Miriam had found the digital drawer. Not a computer folder. A physical drawer full of flash drives labeled by date. The one marked Gal A contained video tests. We watched one in silence. A staff member played me. Another played Adrian. They rehearsed angles. Where I should sit. Where the camera would catch my hand. How close Celeste should stand. When Sophie should enter frame. At one point, the staff member playing Celeste said, if he cries, hold on his face. A laugh from off camera. Adrian's voice. No, not too long. We need sympathy, not pity. I left the room then. Not because I was weak. Because staying would have made me break something, and broken glass helps nobody. In the hallway, I looked at the wall's slogan again. Dignity deserves a home. I thought of June. I thought of Sophie. I thought of my own face being planned as content. For the first time, I understood the real shape of Adrian's cruelty. It was not just greed. Greed wants money. Adrian wanted authorship. He wanted to write the version of every person around him. June as generous founder. Me as fragile widower. Sophie as healing child. Celeste as elegant steward. Himself as visionary son. The money was fuel. The story was the machine. And that is why exposing the story hurt him more than freezing the accounts. Later that day, Albright found the rough cut of the legacy video. Miriam insisted I watch it. I hated her for 10 seconds. Then I agreed. The video began with piano music. June in her shop. June laughing. June holding Sophie as a baby. Then Adrian's voiceover. My mother gave her life to care. No, I thought. She gave her life to living. Care was part of it. Not the brand of it. The video cut to drone shots of Briar Lane. My porch. My red maple. June's lavender. Then a rendering of June house fading over the land like a ghost replacing the real thing. The narrator said, from private grief to public grace. Private grief. My kitchen. My bed. Her last breath. Turned into a transition effect. The final shot was a staged clip of me from the earlier luncheon, wiping my eye. They had slowed it down. Softened the light. Added piano under it. I looked like a man already consenting. I looked like the person they needed me to be. Miriam stopped the video. Enough. No. Play the end. She hesitated. Then played it. The final title read. With Harold Mercer's blessing, June comes home to everyone. I laughed. No humor. Just disbelief leaving through the wrong door. June comes home to everyone. They were going to erase my home and call it her return. That became evidence too. Not because it proved a crime by itself. Because it proved intent. Narrative intent. Pressure intent. Public coercion dressed as tribute. The prosecutors liked that phrase. Public coercion dressed as tribute. I did not care whether they liked it. I wanted them to use it. By the time we finished at the foundation office, the sun had gone down. I walked out carrying nothing. Not allowed. Evidence rules. Chain of custody. All the phrases I knew and respected. Still, it felt strange to leave June's stolen face on those walls. Albright noticed. We will get the photographs removed after documentation. Good. Then she added, Mr. Mercer, there is one thing you should know. I waited. Your son asked for you. No. I am not asking you to go. I am telling you so no one else uses it later. That was decent. No, I said again, softer. She nodded. As I drove home, I realized how many times that word had saved me in 48 hours. No. To the T. No. To the signature. No. To Adrian. No. To the reflex to comfort him. Maybe people think yes is the word that builds families. Sometimes no is the only word that saves what is left of one. At home, I went to the pantry door. Adrian's old pencil marks were still there. Age 6. Age 8. Age 11. A crooked line at 14 where he had insisted he was taller than he was and stood on his toes. June wrote cheater beside it in pencil. I touched that word. Cheater. She had seen him even then. Not condemned him. Seen him. There is a difference. Seeing is love when there is still time. After that, it becomes warning. I took a photograph of the pantry marks. Not for evidence. For myself. Because I was afraid the legal version of Adrian would swallow every earlier version. And I needed to remember that betrayal does not erase childhood. It only makes childhood harder to hold. That night, I put June's last note in the red sewing box. If you cannot save everything, save what is alive. Then I wrote a note of my own. I saved what I could. I placed it under hers. Not because she would read it. Because I needed to answer. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Foundation memorial dinner interrupted by fraud allegations. Mercer legacy event turns into criminal inquiry. Daughter of prominent estate attorney questioned in charity document scandal. They did not use the right words at first. They never do. Scandal. Questions. Irregularities. Dispute. Language always tries to dress the wound before anyone has cleaned it. But the documents kept speaking. The expired notary stamp. The scanned signature. The forged beneficiary change. The capacity addendum. The T. The recording. Adrian's live confession. Celeste's messages. Miriam's backups. June's red envelopes. Paper remembers. Within a week, the foundation accounts were frozen. The hospital group withdrew. The donor pledge evaporated. Mercer Continuum Living lost its bridge financing. Vendors sued. Employees resigned. The board chair issued a statement about being misled, which is what powerful people say when they hope nobody asks how hard they tried not to know. Adrian called me from jail on the 5th day. I almost did not answer. Then I thought of June. Not because she would want forgiveness. Because she would want clarity. His voice came through flat and hoarse. Dad. I said nothing. They are making this worse than it was. There it was again. The old instinct. Not what I did was worse than you knew. They are making this worse. You forged your mother's name, I said. Silence. You tried to take my house. For the foundation. For yourself. You do not understand the pressure I was under. I closed my eyes. I pictured him at 8 years old with the paper airplane. I pictured June saying reward before character. I pictured him in the ballroom saying she would have. Adrian, I said, pressure shows what a thing is made of. It does not create it. He breathed hard into the phone. Are you really going to testify against your only son? That question would have broken me once. It did not now. I am going to testify for my wife. Then I hung up. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time afterward. Not victorious. Do not believe people who make revenge look clean. There is no clean way to watch your child fall, even when he dug the pit himself. I felt grief. Relief. Rage. Shame. A strange fatherly reflex to protect him from consequences I knew he deserved. That reflex is ugly. Real. And useless. Miriam came over that afternoon with folders and donuts. Legal food, she said. Donuts are legal food? In my experience, every deposition runs on sugar and contempt. She spread the next vase across my table. Because the memorial dinner was only the first collapse. After public humiliation comes paperwork. Always. We had to unwind the insurance theft. Block the property transfer. Challenge the capacity documents. Protect Sophie. Establish June's actual intent. Recover what could be recovered. And prove whether the white tea contained anything more than theater. It did. The lab report came back 2 weeks later. There was no poison. No dramatic movie drug. Nothing that would have killed me or knocked me out. But there was a mild sedative, enough to make an older man slower, compliant, and visibly unsteady if combined with stress, poor sleep, and an emotional event. A small chemical nudge. That was almost worse. Because it showed how carefully they had planned the story. They did not need me unconscious. They needed me soft. Wobbly. Tearful. Easy to guide. Easy to film. Easy to describe later. He was overwhelmed. He did not understand. We helped him sign. The cruelty was not theatrical. It was administrative. That became the phrase Detective Albright used. Administrative cruelty. The kind that fits in folders. The kind that smiles. The case expanded. Denise Calder, the notary whose expired stamp had been used, was found living in Florida with no idea her old seal appeared on the insurance form. She gave a statement. Her old stamp had been lost years earlier during an office move. Celeste had access to the storage unit where her father's retired files and old notary materials had been boxed. That was one thread. Another thread was the hospice nurse. Her name was Rosa Jimenez. She had cared for June during the last 3 weeks. I remembered her. Kind eyes. Purple watch. Always smelled faintly of peppermint gum. She had vanished from the schedule 2 days before June died. At the time, Celeste told me Rosa had been reassigned. Rosa told Detective Albright something else. She had raised concerns about Adrian and Celeste pressing June to sign paperwork while medicated and exhausted. The next day, the private care agency removed her from the case after a complaint from the family. Family. Meaning Adrian and Celeste. Rosa had written her own notes. Bless that woman. Everybody who survives ugly systems learns to keep notes. Her notes said June refused to sign anything related to insurance or property. Her notes said June asked whether her husband knew what Adrian was doing. Her notes said June requested privacy to make a recording on an old digital quilting label device. That was the voice Miriam found in the red sewing box. June had not been confused. June had been cornered. And still, she had left a map. The prosecutors found emails between Adrian and Celeste. Not all at once. First fragments. Then backups. Then deleted drafts. Every arrogant person trusts deletion more than they should. One email from Celeste read, "Harold's signature is not the hard part. The hard part is making the room believe his hesitation is grief." Another from Adrian read, "If Dad challenges the policy later, we lean on June's cognitive decline and his emotional instability." June's cognitive decline. She had none. Mine was the backup lie. One living parent too unstable to object. One dead parent too diminished to defend herself. A perfect little bridge made of false pity. Miriam printed that email and pinned it to my corkboard. "For motivation," she said. "I have enough motivation." Then for decoration. "Your kitchen was too peaceful. I left it there. Not because I needed anger. Because I needed not to soften. The months that followed were ugly in quieter ways. Adrian's lawyers tried to negotiate. Celeste's lawyers tried to separate her from Adrian. Malcolm Vane publicly recused his firm from anything connected to the foundation, then privately made sure Sophie's temporary guardian ad litem was someone with a spine. I still did not trust him. But sometimes untrustworthy people are useful when their self-interest points toward the same door as justice. Sophie stayed first with Celeste's cousin, then with us part-time under court supervision. That part was complicated. Children love people who do wrong. That is one of the cruelest facts in the world. Sophie missed her mother. She hated her mother. She worried about her father. She asked if Grandma was angry. She asked if she had done the right thing. She asked if telling the truth made her bad. No child should have to ask that. I told her every time, truth did not break the family. Lies did. Sometimes she believed me. Sometimes she just nodded because adults need children to be comforted faster than children can manage. I learned not to push. June would have been better at that. One evening in late November, Sophie found the lavender garden under brown leaves and asked if Grandma planted it. I said yes. She crouched and touched the dry stems. Mom said this would be a reflection pond. I swallowed. It will stay lavender. Can we put more? As much as you want. She nodded. Then said, can we make one part red? I knew what she meant. Red envelopes. Red means stop. Yes, I said. We can make one part red. That winter, Adrian changed his plea. Not because he was sorry. Because Celeste's lawyers were preparing to blame him for everything, and he wanted to speak first. His statement admitted the insurance form was false. It admitted the property plan was built before June died. It admitted he knew the capacity addendum would be used to pressure me if I resisted. It admitted the tea had been meant to make me easier to manage. But even in confession, he tried to keep one lie alive. He said June would have agreed if she had understood the scale of the good they could do. The judge interrupted him. Mr. Mercer, dead women do not consent retroactively. I wrote that sentence down. Miriam asked for a copy. Celeste held out longer. Of course she did. She had lived her whole life believing rooms could be controlled if you entered them with the right posture. But rooms change when the exits lock. The evidence against her was colder. Emails. Drafts. The sedative request. The old notary seal. The scripting of Sophie. The attempt to build a competency case against me. Her own father testified that the capacity addendum was not prepared by his office and that the language appeared designed to create leverage rather than protection. That testimony destroyed her. Not emotionally. Legally. Malcolm did not cry on the stand. Men like him rarely spend tears where strategy will do. But when asked whether he believed his daughter had acted in good faith, he paused for a very long time. Then said, no. One word again. The same word he used when she tried to silence Sophie. No. Celeste looked at him like he had slapped her. Maybe he had, in the only language their family respected. The trial did not become the dramatic spectacle reporters wanted. Most real consequences are boring to watch. A document is entered. A witness confirms a date. A lawyer objects. A judge overrules. A screen shows a scanned signature. A nurse reads notes. A child does not testify in open court because decent adults finally do one thing right and protect her from that. But June's recording played again. That part was not boring. The courtroom changed when her voice filled it. Even the judge looked down. Harold, if you are hearing this, it means I was right. I had already heard it many times by then. Still, each time felt like losing her and finding her at once. Adrian stared at the table. Celeste stared straight ahead. I watched both of them because I wanted to know if guilt would finally appear. It did not. Regret appeared. Fear appeared. Anger appeared. Guilt did not. That helped me. It is easier to stop mourning the person you hoped was hidden inside them when they refuse every chance to come out. The verdict came in March. It was raining that morning. Of course it was. Stories like this always feel as if they should end under rain, but real weather does not care about symbolism. Still, the rain suited me. It made the courthouse steps shine like old stone washed clean too late. Miriam arrived with an umbrella she refused to share properly. Sophie was not there. That had been decided weeks earlier. She did not need to watch adults put final labels on what she already survived. Eleanor stayed with her at Briar Lane. They were making pancakes badly, according to a text Eleanor sent that morning. The photo showed flour on the counter and Sophie's hand giving a thumbs up. That picture did more for me than any victim advocate pamphlet. Inside the courtroom, Adrian sat at the defense table in a gray suit that did not fit the man he had become. He had lost weight. His hair had gone dull. He looked smaller without rooms agreeing with him. That is what happens to men who live off presentation. Take away the lighting, the title, the stage, the people trained to nod, and the body underneath looks almost ordinary. Almost. Celeste sat 3 seats away with her own attorney. They no longer looked at each other. That was one of the quieter satisfactions of the trial. The partnership had become a lifeboat fight. Adrian's lawyer suggested Celeste drove the plan. Celeste's lawyer suggested Adrian used grief and business desperation to manipulate everyone. Both were partly true. That is another ugly thing about conspiracies. Each villain can point to another villain and still be guilty. When the clerk read the verdicts, I did not feel triumph. I felt the room become factual. Count 1. Guilty. Count 2. Guilty. Count 3. Guilty. The words did not shout. They landed. One by one. Like stamps. I had spent my life respecting stamps. They make private claims public. They make a record. Adrian did not turn around. Celeste did. Not toward me. Toward her father. Malcolm sat in the second row, hands folded over a black cane. He looked back at her once. Then looked down. That was all. After the verdict, the judge scheduled sentencing for a later date and warned everyone against contacting protected witnesses. Protected witnesses. That included me. That included Sophie. Hearing my granddaughter described in court language made me feel both safer and sick. A child should be protected by ordinary love long before the court has to invent a term. In the hallway, reporters waited. Microphones. Cameras. Questions. Mr. Mercer, do you feel justice was served? Mr. Mercer, what would your wife say today? Mr. Mercer, do you forgive your son? That last one followed me like a fly. Do you forgive your son? People love that question because it lets them leave the scene feeling spiritually tidy. I stopped walking. Miriam muttered, "Do not." I did anyway. I turned to the cameras. My wife left evidence because she knew love without truth becomes a weapon. That is all I have to say. Then Miriam grabbed my sleeve and dragged me away. Too poetic, she said. June would have liked it. June married you, so her taste is already in evidence. We went to the diner after. Not because I was hungry. Because the body sometimes needs routine before the soul catches up. I ordered coffee. Miriam ordered pie and ate it like she was punishing someone. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then she said, "You know sentencing will not feel like enough." I know. It never does. Did it for anyone? She looked out the window. Sometimes. Briefly. Then they go home and the empty chair is still there. That was the most honest thing anyone said to me after the verdict. Justice did not bring June back. It did not return the months she spent watching them circle. It did not erase Sophie practicing lies in a bedroom. It did not restore the version of Adrian I had wanted to believe in. It made a record. That mattered. It was not everything. The sentencing hearing came in May. By then the trees had leafed out, which felt rude. The world looking alive while we recited damage. The prosecutor asked if I wanted to give a statement. At first I said no. Then I thought of June's last note. Save what is alive. Part of what was alive was my own voice. So I wrote one. Not long. Not dramatic. I worked on it for 3 days and Miriam cut half of it because she said judges age too. When the day came, I stood at the podium and looked at Adrian. He looked back for the first time since the memorial dinner. His face did something almost human. Almost. I unfolded the paper. I spent 42 years recording other people's documents. I believed records were simple things. A name. A date. A signature. A stamp. I know now they can also hold a family's wound. My wife June was not confused. She was dying. Those are not the same thing. I was not incompetent. I was grieving. Those are not the same thing. My granddaughter was not helping a family ceremony. She was being trained to support a lie. Those are not the same thing. My son did not preserve his mother's legacy. He tried to steal her consent after death. Those are not the same thing. I am not asking this court for revenge. The truth already did that. I am asking this court to make sure the record uses the right names. I stopped there. Because if I kept going, I would start speaking to Adrian as a father, and that was not what the court needed. The judge thanked me. Adrian's attorney spoke. Celeste's attorney spoke. They used words like pressure, grief, poor judgment, charitable confusion, marital influence, reputational collapse. I watched the judge's face. Judges hear human nonsense professionally. This one let them finish. Then he spoke. He said the crimes were not impulsive. They were layered. He said the use of a child as narrative support was aggravating. He said the attempt to frame an elderly widower's grief as incapacity was not just fraud, but a deliberate attack on personhood. Personhood. I wrote that word down too. Adrian received prison time. Celeste received prison time. Different lengths. Different terms. Different arguments for appeal. The numbers mattered less than I thought they would. What mattered was the judge saying in open court that June did not sign. That I was competent. That Sophie had told the truth. That the house was not a legacy site. That it was a home. A home. The simplest word had survived the fanciest theft. After sentencing, Adrian asked to speak to me. His attorney asked through the prosecutor. The prosecutor asked me. Miriam said no before I could answer. I almost agreed with her. Then I remembered the paper airplane again. I hated that paper airplane by then. Memory can be cruel because it does not consult the verdict. I agreed to 5 minutes in a side room with a detective present. Adrian entered in cuffs. That shocked me more than I expected. Not because I thought he did not deserve them. Because somewhere inside me, a father still thought of hands as things that once reached for mine while crossing streets. He sat across from me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I thought I could make it real. Not sorry. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I waited. The foundation. June House. The donors. All of it. I thought if it became real enough, then how it started would matter less. That was the closest he came to honesty. I said, you thought success could launder consent. He looked at me. Maybe he recognized the county clerk in that sentence. Maybe he recognized June. I did not want to be small, he said. There it was. The child under the suit. Not innocent. But visible. You were never small to us, I said. His face twisted. Yes, I was. You and Mom had your little honest life. Your house. Your shop. Your records. Your rules. You could be proud of nothing because you never wanted anything big enough to scare you. That hurt. Not because it was true. Because it showed how deeply he had misunderstood us. Your mother wanted many things, I said. She just did not want them stolen. He looked down. For 1 second, I thought he might cry. Then he swallowed it. Will you take care of Sophie? Yes. Will you tell her I am sorry? I studied him. There are apologies meant for the wounded. And apologies meant to make the guilty feel less alone. This one was the second kind. No, I said. His head lifted. You can tell her yourself when the court allows it and when she is ready to hear it. I will not carry your apology like another forged document. His eyes hardened. There he was again. The man from the memorial dinner. You always did know how to make yourself righteous. No, I said. I know how to read a page. Then I stood. The 5 minutes were not over. But I was. As I walked out, he said one last thing. Dad. I stopped. He said, did Mom hate me? I did not turn around right away. That question found the one soft place left. I thought of June at his school plays. June packing his lunch. June watching him talk too fast at Thanksgiving. June saying reward before character. June saying our son is not lost, he chose. Finally, I said, no. She saw you. That is harder. Then I left him there. I have replayed that conversation many times. Sometimes I wish I had said less. Sometimes I wish I had said more. Most days, I think I said enough. Enough is a mercy when perfect is impossible. Guilty on the major fraud counts. Guilty on exploitation. Guilty on attempted unlawful control of property. Celeste was convicted on conspiracy and elder exploitation. Other charges were reduced, merged, argued, and translated into legal shapes I did not always understand. That part did not matter as much as I expected. By then, the revenge I thought I wanted had already happened. It was not the verdict. It was the collapse of the story. The world no longer called Adrian devoted. It no longer called Celeste organized. It no longer called the foundation generous. It no longer called me fragile. That was the real punishment. They lost the narrative. For people like them, that is oxygen. The money recovery was imperfect. It always is. The civil side moved like winter mud. Slow. Cold. Determined to get on your shoes. Insurance lawyers wanted releases. Foundation creditors wanted priority. The hospital group wanted confidentiality. Adrian's former board members wanted to be described as shocked. Everyone wanted a version of the ending where they had been deceived, but not negligent. Miriam called it the parade of clean hands. They all come in holding soap, she said, but somehow the sink is full of blood. I hired an attorney named Paul Renner. Not flashy. Not warm. Good. At our first meeting, he read the file for 40 minutes without making one comforting sound. Then he closed it and said, your son created a fraud structure. Your daughter-in-law created the pressure system. The hospital group created the incentive by moving too fast around a grieving family asset. We do not chase all of them with the same stick. We use the right stick for each. I liked him immediately. He did not promise full recovery. He did not say slam dunk. He did not call me sir 6 times while planning to bill me for sympathy. He drew boxes. Assets. Claims. Restitution. Insurance dispute. Foundation dissolution. Property injunction. Child protection. Then he pointed to the house. This is the heart. Do not let anyone turn this into only money. That mattered. Because once lawyers enter, grief becomes numbers fast. 640,000. 9 million pledge. 3 million in conditional donor money. 1,800,000 in appraised land value. Legal fees. Damages. Settlement authority. Loss gets translated into columns because columns are easier to negotiate than a dead woman's voice. Paul understood that Briar Lane was not just an asset. It was the place the theft tried to rename. So we fought there first. The hospital group agreed to sign a permanent disclaimer against any claim to the property. The foundation board signed a dissolution plan that returned all rights connected to June's image, name, and recorded materials to me. Adrian's company released the development plans. Every rendering of June House had to be destroyed or archived under litigation hold, never used again. That part gave me more satisfaction than I expected. I wanted those glossy images dead. Not because the idea of hospice care was wrong. Because their version stood on my wife's stolen yes. A good thing built on stolen consent is not a good thing. It is a monument to theft. Paul also recovered the original donor footage. Every clip. Every staged interview. Every slow-motion shot of my face. He asked what I wanted done with it after the legal hold ended. Delete it. He nodded. Then Miriam said, keep one copy of the raw footage where Harold is not edited. I stared at her. Why? So Sophie can see the difference one day. How a camera can lie without changing a single frame. That was the kind of wisdom I hated needing. We kept one copy sealed with the case records. Not for the public. For truth. The insurance company fought hardest. They had paid the wrong beneficiary and did not enjoy being reminded of that. Their position was that the document looked valid at the time. Paul's position was that a dead notary stamp should have looked suspicious to anyone whose job involved paying $640,000. Miriam's position was less polite. She wrote 3 pages of notes for Paul, ending with, "Your industry has built an empire on fine print. Try reading some." Paul did not include that line. I wish he had. Eventually, the insurer settled. Not the full amount. Enough to matter. Enough to fund the legal clinics. Enough to repair the house. Enough to make Adrian's theft fail at its first purpose. That mattered too. Thieves can survive prison in their own minds if the theft still worked. I wanted the theft to fail. Completely. Publicly. Administratively. The same way it had been designed. One page at a time. Some funds were gone. Some assets were frozen. Some insurance money was recovered through settlement. The foundation dissolved. The hospital group paid a smaller restitution amount to avoid a civil fight over due diligence failures. The house stayed mine. Briar Lane stayed Briar Lane. No reflection pond. No donor plaque. No June house built on the place where June had grown lavender for herself. But I did create something in her name. Not a foundation with a glass office and a logo. A small fund through the county library and senior center. It paid for transportation to medical appointments, legal clinics for widows, and document review sessions for older people whose children suddenly became interested in their houses. Miriam ran the first clinic. She opened by saying, "Never sign anything with a tab on it until someone mean has read the whole page." Attendance was excellent. June would have approved. Sophie helped me plant the red flowers in spring. Not roses. She chose red bee balm because she said roses looked like they were trying too hard. That was June's blood, right there. We planted them at the edge of the lavender so the garden looked like it had a warning stitched through it. Purple and red. Memory and stop. One Saturday, Sophie brought the red sewing box downstairs and asked if we could put the envelopes back in it. I said yes. She had kept the last one sealed. The third envelope. We had not opened it before the memorial dinner because everything happened too fast. I had been afraid to open it afterward. That is the truth. Sometimes evidence becomes sacred after it saves you. Opening it feels like asking the dead for one more thing. But Sophie held it out. I think Grandma wanted us to. So we sat at the kitchen table. The same table where June used to sort coupons she never remembered to use. I opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a small piece of quilt paper. June's handwriting was weaker on this one. Only 3 lines. Harold, do not spend the rest of your life at the trial. Come back to the garden. Bring the child. That was all. No accusation. No instruction. No hidden document. Just a command to return. I read it twice. Then Sophie read it. She traced the word garden with one finger. She means us, she said. Yes. And the flowers. Yes. And maybe pancakes. I looked at her. Pancakes. Grandma liked pancakes, right? I laughed. Cheap diner pancakes. The kind that taste like the grill has seen things. Sophie smiled for real. Not polite. Not brave. Real. Can we go? So we went. The diner was still there, though the sign had lost 2 letters and the coffee tasted exactly as bad as it had when June loved it. Sophie ordered pancakes with strawberries. I ordered eggs because someone in the family needed dignity. Then I ate half her pancakes. She said Grandma would have known. I said Grandma knew worse. For the first time in a long time, the memory of June did not enter the room like a wound. It sat down beside us. Quiet. Welcome. Ours. A year after the memorial dinner, I stood in the recorder's office again. Not as an employee. As a citizen filing a trust amendment. The new trust protected Briar Lane from being sold without independent review, court notice, and Sophie's consent when she came of age. Miriam reviewed it. Twice. Then made the young clerk review it again because she said youth should suffer usefully. When the clerk stamped the page, I felt something settle. Not happiness exactly. Security. The kind paper can give when used by honest hands. I walked out into the afternoon with my copy under my arm. The courthouse steps were warm from the sun. For 42 years, I had watched people leave that building either relieved or ruined. That day, I was neither. I was returned. That is different. People ask, usually quietly, if I hate Adrian. I never know how to answer in a way that satisfies them. Hate is too simple. I hate what he did. I hate the voice he used when he said she would have. I hate that Sophie still wakes from dreams where someone asks her to practice lies. I hate that June had to spend some of her last strength protecting me from our own son. But Adrian was once the boy with the paper airplane. That boy existed. This man exists too. Both are true. Truth does not always make a clean shape. It just stops you from living inside the false one. I visit June's grave every Sunday. Not because I think she is there more than anywhere else. June is in the sewing room. In the lavender. In Sophie's sharp little comments. In Miriam's terrible coffee. In every old woman who comes to the document clinic holding a folder to her chest like a shield. But I go because routine can be love when it is chosen freely. I tell her what happened that week. Who came to the clinic. What Sophie planted. Whether the red bee bomb survived the heat. I tell her when I am angry. I tell her when I miss her so badly I forget what room I am in. And sometimes I tell her I am sorry. Sorry I trusted too long. Sorry I mistook silence for peace. Sorry she had to leave red envelopes behind like flares in the dark. I do not hear her answer. But sometimes, when the wind moves through the cemetery maple, I think of her saying, "Late is not the same as never, Harold." Maybe that is only memory. Maybe memory is enough. The last image I want to leave you with is not the memorial dinner. Not Adrian being let out. Not Celeste looking at her father and finding no door open. Not the judge saying dead women do not consent retroactively. It is smaller. Better. One evening in June, Sophie and I sat on the porch at Briar Lane. The lavender was full. The red bee balm had started blooming along the edge like a warning made beautiful. Miriam sat in June's old chair drinking iced tea and pretending she had not added too much sugar. Sophie had the red sewing box on her knees. She was using it to store colored pencils now. That felt right. Not evidence anymore. Not fear. A child's ordinary mess. She drew the house. The maple. The garden. 3 figures on the porch. One was me. One was her. One, she said, was Grandma, but only as a breeze because drawing ghosts was creepy. Across the top she wrote in crooked red letters. No one signs for Grandma now. I had to look away. Miriam said, "Good. Put that on the clinic wall." Sophie said, "It is not for the clinic. It is for Grandpa." So I kept it. It hangs now in the kitchen, beside June's old calendar and above the drawer where I keep every document that matters. This whole story began with a glass of white tea and a red envelope under my plate. I used to think the opposite of theft was recovery. Now I think the opposite of theft is witness. Someone sees what was taken. Someone names who took it. Someone refuses to let the stolen thing be renamed as love. June witnessed before she died. Sophie witnessed when she was afraid. Miriam witnessed with paper. And finally, late but not too late, I witnessed too. That is the ending I keep. Not revenge as fire. Revenge as record. A signature restored. A house still standing. A child no longer practicing lies. And a dead woman, finally heard in the room where they tried to sell her name.